The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Book 5. The High King. Chapter 3. The Prophecy. The companions hastened to the stable. As Gurgi had told them, one of King Rune's horses was missing. Of Arkan, there was no trace. "Let me saddle Melendless," Taran urged Gwydion. "I shall try to overtake her."
"She's going straight to Anuvin!" burst out Fluider. "I never trusted that woman! Great villain! Who knows what treachery she plans? She's off to feather her own nest, you can be sure of it." "Arkan goes more likely to her death," answered Gwydion, his face grim as he looked toward the hills and the leafless trees. "There is no safety for her beyond Caer Dallben. I would protect her, but dare not delay my quest to seek her now." He turned to Dallben. "I must know Henwen's prophecy. It is my only guide." The enchanter nodded and led the companions to the cottage. The aged man still held the parchment and the splintered letter sticks. Now he cast them on the table and gazed at them for a long moment before he spoke.
"Henwen has told us what she can. All I fear that we shall ever learn from her. I have again studied the symbols she pointed out, hoping against hope I had misread them."
His expression was withdrawn, his eyes lowered, and he spoke with difficulty, as if each word wrenched his heart.
"I have asked how Drinwen might be recovered. Hear the answer given us. Ask sooner mute stone and voiceless rock to speak. Such is Henwen's message as I have read it from the first letter stick,"
Dallben said.
"Whether it is a refusal to speak, a prophecy in itself, or a warning to ask no further, I cannot be sure. But the symbols of the second letter stick spell out the fate of Drinwen itself."
Dallben continued, and the enchanter's words filled Taran with cold anguish that struck deep as a sword thrust.
"Quenched will be Drinwen's flame, vanished its power. Night turned to noon, and rivers burn with frozen fire, ere Drinwen be regained."
The ancient man bowed his head, and then was silent for a time.
"The third stick,"
he said at last,
"was destroyed before Henwen could complete her message. She might have told us more, but judging from the first two, we would have cause for no more hope than we have now."
"The prophecies mock us," Taran said. "Hen told us truly. We could as well have asked stones for help." "And got as much sense from them," cried Eilonwe. "Hen could have come straight out and said, we'll never get Drinwen back. Night can't be noon, and that's the end of it."
"In all my travels," added Fluider, "I've never noticed even a small creek burning, not to mention a river. The prophecy is doubly impossible."
"Then yet," said King Rune with innocent eagerness, "this would be an amazing thing to see. I wish it could happen."
"I fear you shall not see it come to pass, King of Mona."
Dallben said heavily. Gwydion, who had been sitting thoughtfully at the table and turning the splintered rods back and forth in his hands, rose and spoke to the companions.
"Henwen's prophecy is disheartening," he said, "and far from what I had hoped. But when prophecies give no help, men must find it themselves."
His hands clenched and snapped the fragment of ashwood.
"As long as life and breath are mine, I will seek Drinwen. The prophecy does not change my plans, but makes them only more urgent."
"Then let us go with you," Taran said, rising to face Gwydion. "Take our strength until your own returns."
"Exactly so!"
Fluider jumped to his feet.
"I'll pay no heed whatever, whether rivers burn or not. Ask stones to speak. I'll ask Arran himself. He'll keep no secrets from a flam."
Gwydion shook his head.
"In this task, the more men, the greater risk. It is done best alone. If any life be staked against Arran Deathlord, it must be mine."
Taran bowed, for Gwydion's tone forbade dispute. "If such is your will," he said, "but what if Ka were to fly ahead to Anuvin?
Send him first. He will go swiftly and bring back whatever knowledge he can gain. Gwydion looked shrewdly at Taran and nodded approval.
You have found some wisdom in your wanderings, assistant pigkeeper. Your plan is sound. Ka may serve me better than all your swords, but I shall not await him here. To do so would cost me too much time. Let him spy out a Nuven as far as he is able, then find me at King Smite's castle in Cantrev Cadafer. Smite's realm lies on my path to a Nuven, and thus my journey will be half accomplished when Ka rejoins me.
At least we can ride with you as far as King Smite's castle, Taran said, and guard you until you are well on your way. Between here and Cantrev Cadafer, Aron's huntsmen may be abroad, still seeking your death.
The foul villains! Cried the bard. Treacherous murderers! They'll have a taste of my sword this time! Let them attack us! I hope they do!
A harp string snapped with a loud crack and set the instrument a jangling.
Yes, well, that's only a manner of speaking, Fluider said sheepishly. I hope we don't come upon them at all. They could be troublesome and delay our journey.
No one has considered the inconvenience to me, said Glue. The former giant had come out of the scullery and looked peevishly around him.
Weasel, muttered Fluider. Drinwin is gone. We don't know if our lives are at stake, and he frets about inconvenience. He's a little man indeed, and always was.
Since no one has mentioned it, said Eilonwy, it seems I'm not being asked to come along. Very well, I shan't insist.
You too have gained wisdom, princess,
said Dalbin.
Your days on Mona were not ill spent.
Of course, Eilonwy went on. After you leave, the thought may strike me that it's a pleasant day for a short ride, to go picking wildflowers, which might be hard to find, especially since it's almost winter. Not that I'd be following you, you understand, but I might, by accident, lose my way and mistakenly happen to catch up with you. By then, it would be too late for me to come home through no fault of my own. Gwydion's haggard face broke into a smile.
So be it, princess. What I cannot prevent, I accept. Ride with me, all those who choose, but no farther than Smite's stronghold at Caer Cadarn.
Ah, princess, Coll sighed, shaking his head. I will not gainsay Lord Gwydion whatever, but it is hardly the conduct of a young lady to force her way thus.
Certainly not, Eilonwy agreed. That's the first thing Queen Teleria taught me. A lady doesn't insist on having her own way. Then next thing you know, it all works out somehow without anyone's even trying. I thought I'd never learn, though it's really quite easy once you get the knack of it. Without further delay, Taran lifted Ka from his fireside perch and carried him to the dooryard. This time the crow did not clack his beak or gabble impudently. Instead of his customary scoldings, hoarse quackings, and mischievous foolery, Ka hunched on Taran's wrist and cocked a beady, attentive eye, listening closely while Taran carefully explained the task. Taran raised his arm and Ka flapped his glossy wings in farewell.
A Nuven!
Ka croaked.
Drinwin!
The crow flew aloft. Within moments, Ka was high over Caer Dalbin. The wind bore him like a leaf, and he hung poised above the watching companions. Then, with a roguish flirt of his wings, Ka sped northwestward. Taran strained his eyes to follow his flight until the crow vanished into the looming clouds. In sadness and disquiet, Taran at last turned away. Ka, he was sure, would be alert to the perils of the journey, the arrows of the huntsmen, the cruel talons and slashing beaks of the Gwythaints, Aron's fierce winged messengers. More than once had Gwythaints attacked the companions, and even the fledglings could be dangerous. Taran recalled from his boyhood the young Gwythaint whose life he had saved, and he well remembered the bird's sharp claws. Despite Ka's gallant heart and sharp wits, Taran feared for the safety of the crow, and feared still more for Gwydion's quest, and to him came the foreboding that an even heavier fate might ride on Ka's outspread wings. It had been agreed that when the travelers neared Great Arvin, King Rune would escort the disgruntled Glue to the ship anchored in the river, there to await his return, for Rune was determined to ride with Gwydion to Caer Cadarn. Glue liked neither cooling his heels on the swaying vessel nor sleeping on the hard pebbles of the shore, but the protests of the former giant could not move the King of Mona to change his plan. While Gwydion held a last hurried council with Dalbin, the companions began leading the horses from the stable. The wise Malengar, Gwydion's white, golden-maned steed, waited calmly for her master. Melenless, Taran's stallion, snorted and impatiently pawed the ground. Eilonwe was already mounted on her favorite, the bay mare Leluger. In a fold of her cloak, the princess carried her most treasured possession, the golden sphere that glowed brightly when she cupped it in her hands. "I'm leaving that uncomfortable crown behind," Eilonwe declared. "There's no use for it at all, except to hold down your hair, and that's hardly with the blisters. But I'd sooner walk on my hands than go without my bauble. Besides, if we need a light, we shall have one. That's much more practical than a hoop on top of your head." In a saddlebag, she had packed the embroidery made for Taran, intending to finish it along the way. "Perhaps," Eilonwe added, "I might fix the color of Henwin's eyes while I'm at it." Fluider's mount was the huge, tawny cat, Lion, herself tall as a horse. Seeing the bard, she purred loudly, and Fluider could barely keep the powerful animal from knocking him down with her nuzzlings.
"Gently, old girl!"
cried the bard as Lion thrust her head between his neck and shoulder.
I know you want a tune on my harp. I shall play one later, I promise you."
Glue had recognized Lion immediately.
"That's not fair,"
he sniffed.
"By all rights, she belongs to me."
"Yes,"
replied Fluider.
"if you count feeding her those vile potions you once brewed to make yourself grow bigger. If you care to ride her, you're welcome to try. Though I warn you, Lion has a memory longer than her tail."
Lion indeed had begun lashing her tail at the sight of Glue. She towered over the pudgy little man. Her yellow eyes blazed, her whiskers twitched, her tufted ears went flat against her head, and from her throat came a sound quite unlike her greeting to Fluider. Fluider quickly strummed a melody on his harp. Lion turned her eyes from Glue, and her mouth curved in an enormous smile, and she blinked fondly at the bard. However, Glue's pale face had gone paler, and he edged away from the cat.
"When I was a giant,"
Glue muttered,
"things were considerably better managed."
King Rune saddled his dapple gray steed. Since Call had also decided to accompany Gwydion, would ride the sorrel mare Lemery, full of Melenless and Leluger, Glue had no choice but to climb up behind Gurgi on his shaggy pony, a companionship unwelcome to all three. Taran, meanwhile, helped Call rummage in the stables, forge, and tool sheds for weapons.
"Few enough of them there are,"
said Call.
"These spears have served me well as bean poles,"
the stout warrior added.
"I had hoped never to use them for another purpose. Alas, the only blade I can give Gwydion is rusted from propping up one of the apple trees. As for helmets, there are none save my leather cap, and the sparrows have a nest in it. I shall not disturb them. But my old pate is tough as leather,"
Call said, winking.
"It can last me to Caircadarin and back. And you, my lad,"
Call went on cheerfully, though he had not failed to notice Taran's troubled frown.
"I remember a day when an assistant gatekeeper would have been all flash and fire to ride with Lord Gwydion. Now you look as glum as a frostbitten turnip."
Taran smiled. "I myself would ride to Anuvan if Gwydion allowed me. What you say is true, old friend. For the boy I was, this would have been a bold adventure, full of glory. And this much I have learned. A man's life weighs more than glory, and a price paid in blood is a heavy reckoning." "My heart is not easy," Taran added. "Long ago you made your way to Anuvan to rescue Henwin after she had been stolen from you. Tell me, what chance is Gwydion alone in Aran's realm?"
"No man has better,"
said Call, shouldering the spears, and he was gone from the shed before Taran realized the old warrior had not really answered him at all. Cair Dalbin lay far behind them, and the day was darkening when the companions made camp deep in the shadows of the forest. Eilonwe happily flung herself to the ground. "It's been long since I've slept on comfortable roots and rocks," she cried. "What a pleasant change from goose feathers!" Gwydion allowed a fire to be built, and while Call saw to the mounts, Gurgi opened his wallet of food to share out provisions. For the most part, the companions were silent, chilled, and stiff after the long day's journey. King Rune, however, had lost none of his good spirits. As the travelers huddled closer to the pale flames, Rune picked up a twig and scratched busily on the earth, covering the ground before him with a spider web of lines.
About that seawall, said Rune. I think I see how it went wrong. Yes, exactly so. Now, here's the way to do it.
From across the fire, Taran saw Rune's eyes brightly eager, and on his face the familiar boyish grin. But Rune, Taran sensed, was no longer the feckless princeling he had known on the Isle of Mona. As Rune was absorbed in the tasks he had planned, so Taran had been caught up in his own labors at forge, loom, and the potter's wheel. And if Rune had found manhood in ruling a kingdom, Taran had found the same in toiling among the staunch folk of the Free Comets. He watched Rune with new affection. The king of Mona spoke on, and Taran's interest was drawn to the scratchings on the ground. He studied them as Rune continued. Taran smiled. One thing had not changed, he realized. As usual, the king of Mona's intentions went somewhat beyond the king of Mona's skill. I fear your wall may tumble if you build it thus, Taran said with a kindly laugh. See this part here? He pointed. The heavier stones must be sunk deeper. And here...
Amazing!
Exclaimed Rune, snapping his fingers.
Quite right! You shall come to Mona and help me finish it!
He began scratching new lines so vigorously he nearly pitched himself into the fire.
Oh, great and kindly master!
Cried Gurgi, who had been listening closely without altogether understanding what the two comrades had been discussing.
Oh, clever scannings and plannings! Gurgi wishes he too had wisdom of wise speakings.
Gwydion warned them to silence.
Our fire is risk enough without adding noise to it. I can only hope Arin's huntsmen are not abroad. We're too few to withstand even a handful of them. They are not common warriors,
Gwydion added, seeing Rune's questioning expression.
But an evil brotherhood. Slay one of their band and the strength of the others grows that much greater.
Taran nodded. They are as much to be feared as the Cauldron-born, he cautioned Rune. The deathless, voiceless creatures that guard Anuvan. Perhaps more to be feared. The Cauldron-born cannot be slain, yet their power dwindles if they journey too far, or stay too long beyond Arin's realm. Rune blinked, and Gurgi fell silent, glancing behind him uncomfortably. Memory of the ruthless Cauldron-born turned Taran's thoughts once more to Henwin's prophecy. The flame of Drinwin quenched, Taran murmured. Yet how shall Arin achieve this? For all his power, I will not believe he can even draw the blade.
Prophecy is more than the words that shape it, Gwydion said. Seek the meaning that underlies it. For us, the flame of Drinwin will be as good as quenched if Arin keeps it from my hands. Its power will indeed vanish, for all it may avail us, should the blade be locked forever in his treasure hoard.
Treasure?
Said Glue, stopping his munchings only long enough to speak the word.
The Death Lord's domain is as much a treasure house as a stronghold of evil,
Gwydion said.
Long has it been filled with all the fair and useful things Arin has stolen from Prydain. These treasures do not serve him. His purpose is to deprive, to keep their use from men, to sap our strength by denying us what might yield a richer harvest than any of us here has known.
Gwydion paused.
Is this not death, but in another guise?
I've been told, Taran said, the treasure troves of Anuvan hold all that men could wish for. Plows there are said to be that work of themselves, scythes that reap with no hand to guide them, magical tools and more, Taran went on. For Arin stole the craft secrets of metalsmiths and potters, the lore of herdsmen and farmers. This knowledge, too, lies locked forever in his hoard. Glue sucked his teeth. The morsel of food stayed untouched in his chubby fingers. For a long while he said nothing. At last he cleared his throat.
I mean to forgive your slights and humiliations. It would not have happened when I was a giant, I assure you. But no matter, I pardon you all. In token of my goodwill, I too shall journey with you.
Gwydion looked at him sharply.
Perhaps you shall,
he said quietly after a time.
No question of it now,
Fluider snorted.
The little weasel hopes to snip out something for himself. I can see his nose trembling. I never thought the day would come when I should want him at our side. but I think that's safer than having him at our backs.
Glue smiled blandly.
I forgive you too.
He said.